We first spotted the town from the ridge above Elk Creek. I'm Josh, and my friends Mike and Sarah had driven up for a weekend away from city noise. Elk Creek was our usual escape: quiet trails, a small lake, and a single gas station that barely stocked essentials. No cell service, no Wi-Fi, just trees and hills. Perfect for unplugging. On our second afternoon, after hiking to the ridge, Mike pointed toward a hollow between the hills. "Do you see that?" he said, shading his eyes. There it was, a cluster of rooftops peeking through the pines, maybe 3 or 4 miles off. No smoke rising. No cars moving. Just rooftops, frozen in place. Sarah squinted. Was that on the map? I fumbled my paper map, dog-eared and folded so many times it was almost torn. Nothing. It's not marked. That night at the gas station, we asked the attendant, an old guy named Earl with wireframe glasses and arms covered in faded tattoos, about the mystery town. He paused, his hand hovering over a dusty pack of gum. "Birchwood," he said finally, voice low. "Used to be a real place back in the day. Folks started leaving in the late 90s. By 2000, nobody lived there. Or so they say." "What happened?" Sarah asked. Earl shrugged. "No one really knows. People just vanished or died. Search parties went in, didn't find much. After a while, no one cared." We looked at each other, and I swear you could almost see the idea spark. "Let's go," Mike said. The next morning, we loaded our gear into my old Jeep, a cooler, backpacks, flashlights, and headed down the overgrown path that must have once been a dirt road. Branches scratched the paint, roots nearly lifted us off the ground. After an hour of bumping and swearing, the trees opened up, and we rolled into what had once been Main Street. Birchwood lay silent. Dozens of buildings in various states of decay, a general store with its sign half fallen, a diner with broken neon letters, a tiny schoolhouse with its playground equipment rusting. No birds. No wind. Just an eerie stillness, as if sound itself was scared to enter. We parked near the old town hall. Mike cut the engine. "Ready?" Sarah tightened her ponytail. "Let's stick together." Classic horror move, right? But we weren't thinking about horror movies. We were thinking about adventure, finding relics, maybe an old camera with photos, letters in dusty drawers. Nothing violent. Just history. Our first stop was a small ranch-style house on the corner. White paint peeled off its siding. The front door hung on one hinge. Inside, dust lay thick as a blanket. I kicked aside a broken chair and stepped into the living room. Family photos still hung on the wall, smiling faces from the 80s. A knitted Afghan lay folded on the couch. A child's toy truck lay abandoned on the floor. Everything spoke of normal life, until I caught the smell. It was like rotten meat, sour and sharp. My stomach clenched. I moved toward the kitchen doorway. There, seated at a table, were 2 figures. No movement. Just 2 bodies so decomposed they were half skeleton, clothes hanging loose, hair matted. One still held a spoon over a dusty plate. I froze. My flashlight clattered to the floor. My heart pounded. Then I stumbled backward, tripped, and crashed through the doorway. Once I was outside, I knelt in the dirt and vomited. Mike and Sarah came running. They'd each seen their own horrors. Sarah had found a living room with a father, mother, and little girl, all slumped on the sofa. Their skin had turned a sick gray, eyes sunken. No blood. No sign of struggle. Mike discovered a bedroom where 2 teenage boys lay side by side, faces frozen in surprise. A half-finished board game sat on the nightstand. We gathered on the cracked sidewalk, pale and shaking. "What do we do?" Sarah whispered. "Keep going," Mike said, though his voice wavered. "We need to see more. Figure out what happened." I wanted to argue. To say we should leave. But curiosity clawed at me. We headed toward the diner, the big, neon-framed one down the street. Its sign read, Maggie's Diner, though the M and A were dark. Inside, booths sat empty, menus still on tables. The counter was lined with stools, one knocked over. Coffee cups, plates with half-eaten slices of pie, sugar shakers, all coated in dust. No bodies here, but every so often I thought I heard a creak, like someone shifting in a booth. I spun around. Nothing. We moved on to the post office. Rows of mailboxes stood open, letters spilling out. I picked up an envelope addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Thompson. Postmarked June 1999. Inside was a photograph of a smiling couple standing in front of that very post office. I slipped it into my pocket. Outside, the afternoon sun felt too bright. Shadows seemed to shrink away. We followed a gravel path toward the church at the far end of town. Its steeple leaned at a slight angle, windows boarded up. A bell hung inside the tower, rusted. The front doors were cracked open. We pushed inside. Pews lay scattered, hymnals strewn across the floor. The altar cloth was gray with dust. But there was something else, scratches on the wooden pews, like long, deep gouges. They led toward the back. My flashlight beam caught something on the altar steps, footprints. Dusty, muddy prints, like someone had walked through from outside. They ended halfway up the steps. "Who's here?" Sarah's voice trembled. No answer. We crept forward, hearts in our throats. That's when the light went out. Total darkness. I fumbled for my flashlight, dead battery. Mike's light flickered, then stayed dark. Sarah whimpered. A distant sound echoed, a door creaking shut. Slow. Deliberate. I grabbed Sarah's hand. Mike pushed toward the exit. We barreled out of the church into the blinding afternoon light, panting. Back on Main Street, we regrouped. "Something's wrong," I said, voice low. "These houses, the bodies, nobody cleaned them up? Why would they leave them?" Sarah shivered. "This place feels alive. Like it's watching us." Mike's jaw was tight. "I just want to know what happened. Then we leave. I promise." We decided to check one more building before heading back to camp, a 2-story house with a porch swing hanging at an odd angle. The front steps creaked under our weight. Inside, wallpaper peeled like dead skin. A grand staircase curved upward. We climbed, each step groaning. On the second floor, a hallway stretched into darkness. Doors on either side, some closed, some open. From one room came a soft hum, like a lullaby on a broken record. Sarah held up her light. In the corner of the room, a small music box spun, its lid open. The tune was slow, warped. No bodies here, but toys lay scattered, dolls with missing limbs. A toy train stopped mid-track. A sudden gust of wind slammed the door shut behind us. The humming music box stopped. Silence swallowed the hallway. I yanked at the doorknob. Locked. Sarah pounded. Mike tried to break it down. Nothing worked. Then, a whisper, barely audible, "Help us." We froze. The whisper came again, closer, "Help us." Panic rose. Mike shouted, "Get the door open." I slammed my shoulder against it. Wood splintered. The lock gave way. We tumbled into the hallway and sprinted down the stairs, 2 at a time, until we burst outside. The porch swing was still, but the front door slammed behind us, as if something inside wanted to keep us there. We didn't speak until we reached my Jeep. Doors slammed, engines roared, and we tore down the overgrown path without looking back. Trees whipped past the windows. Dust clouded behind us. Only when we reached the paved road did we slow. The 3 of us sat in silence, breathing hard. Finally, Sarah said, "That whisper, did you hear it?" Mike swallowed. "Yeah. We shouldn't have come here." I nodded. "Let's get out of here. Now." We didn't stop until we were back at the cabin in Elk Creek. Night had fallen, and the woods felt alive with sounds, owls, rustling leaves, distant howls. I lay in my sleeping bag, eyes open, replaying every moment. Why were the bodies left? Why the music box? And who, or what, was whispering? In the darkness, I vowed, tomorrow, we'd return to Birchwood. We had to know what happened. But as I drifted toward sleep, I wondered if that was the worst idea I'd ever had. When dawn broke over Elk Creek, I couldn't shake the images of Birchwood. The bodies. The whisper. The music box. Mike and Sarah were already loading my Jeep when I stumbled out of the cabin. "Ready?" Mike's voice was tight. Sarah nodded, her eyes red from lack of sleep. "Let's finish this." We drove back along the narrow road, headlights cutting through morning mist. The path to Birchwood seemed longer this time, the trees crowding in as if to keep us out. By the time we reached the town, the sun was high enough to chase away most shadows, but Birchwood looked even more desolate in daylight. Windows stared blankly, doors hung ajar, and the silence felt alive, as if the town itself was watching. We headed first for the church. The front doors were firmly shut, but at the back a side window hung open. Inside, pews lay scattered and hymnals were torn to pieces. Sunlight streamed through holes in the roof, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. My flashlight barely cut through the gloom beyond the sunbeams. Then we heard it, a faint, distant hum like chanting carried on a cold draft. At the altar, the wooden panel covering a small door looked loose. We pried it open and found a narrow stairwell descending into blackness. The chanting grew louder as we climbed down. The walls were damp stone, slick with moss. At the bottom, we stepped into a circular chamber. Burnt-out candles stood in a ring around a low stone altar, symbols carved into the floor that twisted together in impossible shapes. In the center lay a leather-bound book, its pages yellowed and curling. I approached with trembling hands and opened it. The writing was scrawled in a language I couldn't name, but across one page in English were words that froze my blood. We bind them here, their spirits remain. To hold the veil, so death's domain does not spill forth and claim the living. The chanting stopped. Silence pressed in. Mike pointed to the walls, where faint red stains traced the carvings. Sarah's light fell on something half buried in dust, a human finger bone. A deep rumble shook the chamber. Candle holders rattled. From the shadows came a voice, guttural and ancient, "Release us." We fled up the stairs and burst into the church nave, gasping for air as the stone door slammed shut behind us. Dust rained from the ceiling. I shoved at the door, it wouldn't budge. Sarah screamed when a shadow moved across the altar, too large to be human. Mike found a side exit, yanked it open, and we tumbled out into the blinding afternoon light. The moment we cleared the threshold, the chanting ceased. Back on Main Street, hearts pounding, we realized Birchwood wasn't abandoned, it was sealed. The townspeople hadn't left, they'd been bound here. And something had been waiting for release. A cold wind carried a distant, childish laughter that made my blood run cold. We raced to Maggie's diner, hoping to find clues. Inside, fresh dust coated every surface, as if the town were reliving its decay in fast motion. On the counter lay a newspaper face up. The headline read, "Birchwood Disappearances, Entire Town Vanishes Overnight." Dated July 15, 2000, it described how all 142 residents vanished without a trace, leaving behind empty houses and silent streets. Search teams found everything intact, except the people. I felt a chill. We'd seen the bodies, but now we knew the town had tried to keep itself sealed. We spent the next hour racing through buildings. The more we looked, the more the town seemed to shift. Houses we'd entered earlier now had new rooms, streets curved where they hadn't before. It was as if Birchwood was alive, rearranging itself to trap us. By midday, a heavy fog rolled in, swallowing Main Street. We stuck close, shouting each other's names. Through the fog appeared a figure, tall, thin, cloaked in rags, its face hidden. It moved with jerky, unnatural motions, pointing at us with a bone-white hand. Then more figures emerged, dozens of them, their faces twisted in silent screams, eyes glowing pale. The bodies we'd seen earlier, now standing upright and watching. Sarah screamed. Mike grabbed her arm. "Run," we all shouted. We bolted down the street, the dead following in eerie silence. Their bones scraped the pavement as they moved. We reached the church steps and the side door stood open as if waiting. No chanting this time, just a deafening hush. I shoved my friends inside, and we slammed the door behind us. In the circular chamber, the leather book lay open again. Candles reignited, flickering to life. The carvings on the floor glowed red. The shadows on the walls writhed, as though alive. A voice echoed from every corner, "You shall bind the living, to free the dead." I fumbled through the pages until I found an incantation in English. "By blood unspilled and breath unseen. We release the veil, let all convene." We looked at each other, terror in our eyes, but we knew what we had to do. Sarah found a shard of metal and pricked her palm. Mike did the same. I dripped my blood onto the altar stone. Together, we chanted the words. The candles blazed. The walls trembled. Outside, the dead beat against the door, their hollow voices chanting with us. By blood unspilled and breath unseen. We release the veil, let all convene. The ground shook violently, and a blinding light filled the chamber. Then, silence. The candles snuffed out. The book snapped shut. The stone door creaked open. We stumbled into the church nave. Sunlight streamed through the broken roof. No fog. No dead. No chanting. We raced back to the jeep, adrenaline pumping, and tore down the overgrown path without looking back. Trees whipped past the windows, dust clouded behind us. When we finally slowed on the paved road, Sarah whispered, "Did we do it?" I started the engine. "I don't know. Let's get out of here." Back at Elk Creek, we unloaded in silence. The sun set blood-red over the hills. We promised never to speak of Birchwood again. Weeks later, I tried to find the town on satellite maps, nothing. Just endless forest. I searched news archives, only a brief mention of a place called Birchwood in the 1920s, wiped out by a forest fire. No disappearances in 2000. I keep the newspaper clipping and the book page in a box under my bed. Sometimes at night, I dream of chanting and candlelight, of shadows reaching out. I wonder if we released something, or trapped ourselves forever. So if you ever hear chanting in the dark, or find an old music box playing by itself, do yourself a favor. Run. And whatever you do, don't look back.